Ask the girl who she's afraid of. Naomi Carter's voice cut through the first-class cabin just as Sergeant Daniel Whitmore reached for her wrist. For one suspended second, no one moved. The overhead lights hummed. A coffee cup trembled on a tray table. 12-year-old Sofia Ramirez sat 3 rows away, pale and silent, her fingers locked around the strap of a faded blue backpack. Then Whitmore stepped closer. "Ma'am, stand up and come with us." Naomi did not argue. She looked past him toward the polished man beside Sofia, a silver-haired passenger in a navy suit who wore concern like it had been tailored for him. Richard Vale had told the crew that Naomi tried to steal the girl's passport. He said she had followed Sofia through the terminal. He said the child looked frightened. Every word was calm, reasonable, and completely false. Naomi rose slowly, keeping her hands visible. Around her, phones appeared above the seats. A woman near the window whispered that she had known something was wrong. A man across the aisle leaned back as though Naomi's presence had suddenly become dangerous. No one asked Sofia a single question. No one noticed that the girl was not looking at Naomi. She was staring at Richard. Keep watching, because what these officers believed was a simple removal was about to expose a secret hidden 30,000 feet above the ground. Subscribe now for more stories where truth stands up when power refuses to listen. "I need you to check her passport," Naomi said, her tone low and controlled. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "You don't give instructions here." His younger partner, Officer Luke Bennett, glanced toward Sofia, then back at Naomi. Something in her posture bothered him. She was too composed. Not arrogant. Not careless. Trained. Naomi felt the cool air from the open boarding door brush the side of her face. Beyond it, the jet bridge stretched toward the terminal, bright and empty. If she crossed that doorway, Richard would have exactly what he wanted, distance between her and the child. "Sir," Naomi said, keeping her eyes on Whitmore, "ask Sofia where she met Mr. Vale." Richard gave a soft, offended laugh. "This is absurd. I was helping her." Sofia's grip tightened around the backpack. Whitmore noticed the movement but misunderstood it. He stepped between Naomi and the girl. "That's enough." Naomi's pulse stayed steady, but every instinct inside her sharpened. 6 months of surveillance had led to this flight. 6 months of names, airport footage, false documents, and children moved quietly between cities while respectable men smiled for cameras. Richard Vale had never seen Naomi's real face until today. At least, she had believed he hadn't. Then Richard adjusted his cuff and pressed 2 fingers against the inside of his wrist. A harmless gesture to everyone else. To Naomi, it was a signal. The operation had changed. Someone was waiting beyond the plane. Someone had been warned. She turned toward Sofia. "Blue door," Naomi said clearly. The girl's eyes widened. Richard's expression changed for less than a second, but Naomi saw it. The warmth vanished. The mask slipped. "What did you say to her?" Whitmore demanded. Naomi did not answer him. Richard was already rising from his seat. Richard rose with the careful ease of a man who expected every room to make space for him. His navy jacket settled smoothly across his shoulders as he reached toward Sofia, but the girl recoiled before his hand came close. It was small, almost invisible, yet Naomi saw it. So did Luke Bennett. His eyes narrowed. Whitmore did not turn. He kept one hand near Naomi's arm and pointed toward the open boarding door. "Move." Naomi obeyed by half a step, buying seconds without making it obvious. The jet bridge beyond the doorway smelled faintly of rain and hot metal. Ground crews moved beneath the windows, unaware that a federal investigation was unraveling above them. Sofia's breathing had become quick and shallow. She pressed the blue backpack against her chest as though it were the only solid thing in the cabin. Naomi knew what was inside it: a paperback, a sweatshirt, a plastic water bottle, and a sealed envelope containing the names of 3 people Richard Vale believed were already dead. Sofia had found that envelope in a locked office after escaping a house outside Baltimore. She had carried it for 9 days. She had trusted no one until Naomi met her in a quiet room at a federal field office and placed a blue card on the table. "Blue door," Naomi had told her. "If anything changes, if you feel afraid, look for the blue door." It means I am still with you. Now there was no blue door, only rows of leather seats, glowing phone screens, and faces eager to decide who looked guilty. Naomi wore plain black slacks, worn walking shoes, and a gray coat bought from a department store near Union Station. Her hair was pulled low at the back of her neck. No jewelry. No visible weapon. No badge. Everything about her had been chosen to disappear. She had spent 6 months building that invisibility, learning Richard's travel habits, watching him enter charity events through front doors and private terminals through side entrances. He donated to children's hospitals. He appeared in photographs beside senators. He remembered flight attendants by name. Men like Richard did not hide in shadows. They stood beneath bright lights and counted on the world to trust the suit. "Sophia," he said gently, "come sit with me until this confusion is over." The girl did not move. Luke shifted closer to the aisle. "Sir, maybe give her some room." Richard's smile remained, but the warmth behind it vanished. "Officer, I am trying to keep a frightened child calm." Naomi turned her head slightly. "Then ask why she is frightened." Whitmore exhaled through his nose. "You have been told to stop speaking to her." "I am not speaking to her," Naomi said. "I am speaking to you." The cabin tightened around the words. Luke looked toward Sophia again. A faint red mark circled the girl's wrist, half hidden beneath her sleeve. It was not fresh, but it was there. Naomi had noticed it the moment Sophia boarded. Richard had noticed Naomi noticing. That was when the plan began to break. Whitmore reached for Naomi's other wrist. "You are leaving this aircraft now." Naomi let her hands remain loose. Resistance would give Richard more time. Compliance might do the same. Every option narrowed toward the open door. Then Sophia whispered, barely louder than the air system above them. "I do not know him." Whitmore stopped. Richard's head turned. Slowly. Luke heard it clearly. "What did you say?" he asked. Sophia looked at Naomi, not at the officers. Her eyes were wet, but her voice steadied. "I said I do not know that man." Richard's polished expression held for one more second. Then his right hand slipped toward the inside of his jacket. Richard's hand paused inside his jacket when Luke Bennett stepped into the aisle. The movement was not dramatic. It was barely more than a shift of weight and a raised palm, but it changed the balance of the cabin. "Keep your hands where I can see them, sir," Luke said. Richard looked almost amused. "You cannot be serious." "I am serious." For the first time, Whitmore turned away from Naomi. His attention moved from Richard to Sophia, then back again, as though the story he had accepted without question had begun to split at the seams. Richard slowly withdrew his hand. Between his fingers was a black leather passport holder. "This belongs to the child," he said. "I was trying to return it." Sophia pressed herself deeper into the seat. "That is not mine." The words came stronger this time. Several passengers lowered their phones. The thrill of watching someone else's humiliation had given way to uncertainty, and uncertainty made the cabin quiet. Naomi studied the passport holder. A gold emblem had been pressed into the leather, but it was not American. She recognized the mark from photographs pinned across a conference room wall in Washington. Richard's organization used identical holders to move false identities through airports without drawing attention. Each one contained a different name, a different birthday, and a different version of a child's life. "Open it," Naomi said. Whitmore glanced at her sharply. "You are still not in charge here." "Then take charge," she replied. "Open it." Richard gave a short laugh. "This woman has been following us since the terminal." She approached Sophia near the restroom. She asked questions about her flight. I stepped in because the girl looked uncomfortable. His voice carried the smooth patience of someone explaining an obvious truth to slow people. "You officers did exactly what you were supposed to do." Whitmore's shoulders loosened slightly, grateful for the familiar version of events. Richard saw it and continued. "She has no identification, no boarding pass in her hand, and no reason to interfere with a minor traveling under supervision." Naomi felt the old pattern forming around her. Credentials before truth. Appearance before evidence. Richard knew how to feed authority the story it wanted. He had built his reputation on that skill. Luke did not move. Who is supervising her? Richard gestured toward an empty seat across the aisle. Her guardian stepped off to speak with the gate agent. What is the guardian's name? Luke asked. Richard's smile thinned. Patricia Lane. Sophia shook her head. I do not know anyone named Patricia. Whitmore looked toward the boarding door, perhaps expecting a woman to appear and settle everything. No one came. Outside, a baggage cart rolled past the jet bridge windows, its yellow beacon flashing across the cabin walls in slow intervals. Light. Shadow. Light again. Naomi remembered the first time she had seen Richard Vale. He had stood beneath crystal chandeliers at a charity banquet in Georgetown, speaking about protecting vulnerable children. His foundation had raised millions. His photograph had appeared beside smiling families, hospital staff, and elected officials. He looked directly into cameras and spoke about dignity. 3 days later, federal analysts connected one of his private aircraft to a false passport discovered in Atlanta. Naomi had spent months watching him shake hands while children's names disappeared from databases. That was why she had boarded without a visible badge. That was why no one could know she was there. Until Sophia was safe, Naomi was supposed to remain invisible. Richard turned toward Whitmore. Remove her before this gets worse. The command came naturally, as though the officer worked for him. Whitmore reached again for Naomi's arm. Luke opened the passport holder first. His expression changed before he said a word. Inside was Sophia's photograph beneath another girl's name. Luke held the passport beneath the overhead light, and the false name seemed to darken the entire cabin. Emily Grace Turner. Age 12. Born in Richmond. The photograph was Sophia's, but everything else belonged to a child who did not exist. Whitmore stared at the page, his hand still hovering near Naomi's arm. Richard recovered first. That proves nothing, he said. The child may be traveling under a temporary identity for protection. Naomi watched his eyes, not his smile. He was measuring the distance to the rear galley, the open boarding door, and Sophia's seat. He was no longer trying to convince everyone. He was deciding which exit remained possible. Protection from whom? Luke asked. Richard looked at Sophia. From people like her. He pointed at Naomi, and the accusation landed exactly where he intended. A few passengers looked at her again. They had seen the false passport, yet some still found it easier to fear the black woman in plain clothes than the wealthy man holding a first-class ticket. Naomi felt the metal at her wrist press against her skin as Whitmore tightened his grip without realizing it. She could have ended the uncertainty with 2 words and a badge, but the operation depended on Richard believing she had no authority. Federal agents were positioned in the terminal, near baggage claim, and outside the private service road. They were waiting for his contact to appear. Revealing herself too soon could scatter everyone connected to him. But Sophia's safety had become more important than the case. Sophia, Naomi said, tell Officer Bennett where you got that backpack. Richard's voice sharpened. Do not answer her. Luke turned. Sir, stop speaking for the child. The change in his tone was small, but Naomi heard it. He was finally listening to what did not fit. Sophia swallowed and looked down at the worn blue fabric in her lap. A woman gave it to me at a bus station in Baltimore, she said. She told me to keep it close and find someone named Naomi Carter. The cabin went still. Whitmore looked at Naomi. Richard's face did not move, but one finger tapped once against his leg. And did you find her? Luke asked. Sophia nodded toward Naomi. She found me first. A murmur moved through the seats. Naomi stepped closer, but Whitmore blocked her path. You are saying you know this child. I am saying she is not safe with him. That is not an answer. It is the answer that matters. Richard moved into the aisle. This has gone far enough. The flight needs to leave, and that woman needs to be removed. Naomi saw Sophia flinch at the sound of his voice. Look at her, Naomi told Whitmore. Not at me. Not at him. Look at her. Whitmore finally did. Sophia's shoulders were raised nearly to her ears. Her shoes did not touch the floor. She was watching Richard the way people watched a closing door when they were afraid they would not escape in time. Naomi lowered her voice. Ask her one question without telling her what the answer should be. Whitmore's expression hardened, but doubt had entered it now. He faced Sophia. Do you want to leave this plane with Mr. Vale? Sophia's answer came immediately. No, Richard's polished calm cracked. She is confused. No, Sophia repeated, louder now. He was at the house. The words changed the air. Naomi took one step forward. Whitmore caught her wrist again. Richard retreated one step toward the rear of the cabin. Sophia opened her backpack and reached inside. Naomi knew what she was looking for. Do not take anything out, Richard said. Sophia ignored him. From beneath the sweatshirt, she pulled a sealed white envelope. 3 names were written across the front. Richard saw them, and for the first time, fear reached his eyes. Then he turned toward the rear exit. Richard moved fast, but not toward the open boarding door. He turned down the aisle toward the rear galley, where a narrow service exit stood beyond the last row. Naomi understood immediately. The front of the aircraft was crowded with passengers, officers, and crew. The back offered privacy, storage compartments, and access to the catering stairs still positioned outside. Luke, stop him, she said. Whitmore tightened his hold on her wrist. You do not give orders. Then look at what he is doing. Richard pushed past an empty seat and glanced over his shoulder. His face had lost every trace of concern. Sophia clutched the envelope to her chest, frozen between fear and courage. Luke stepped into the aisle. Mr. Vale, stay where you are. Richard did not stop. I am getting away from this chaos. The aircraft door is closed back there, the lead flight attendant said. You cannot exit. Then open it. His voice was no longer smooth. It carried command without courtesy. Passengers turned in their seats. Phones rose again, but the mood had changed. No one was watching Naomi now. Every eye followed Richard. Naomi felt Whitmore's certainty beginning to break, but he still held on to the first decision he had made. Release me, she said. Not until I know who you are. You know enough to know he lied. That does not explain you. Richard reached the rear galley and pulled at the service door handle. A flight attendant stepped back and pressed the call button near the wall. A soft chime sounded through the cabin. Sophia flinched. Naomi lowered her voice. Stay in your seat, Sophia. Keep the envelope with you. Richard looked toward the girl. Give that to me. Sophia shook her head. He took one step forward. Luke moved between them. Sir, do not approach her. Richard's eyes hardened. You are making a serious mistake. Maybe, Luke said. But I am done ignoring what she is telling us. Naomi saw the shift in him. It was not confidence yet. It was responsibility. Sometimes that was enough to change everything. Whitmore released one of Naomi's wrists but kept hold of the other. What is in the envelope? He asked. Evidence. Of what? Names connected to missing children, false travel records, and 3 private flights that never appeared on official manifests. His face changed slightly. How would you know that? Naomi did not answer. Not yet. Richard pointed toward her. She is inventing a story because she got caught interfering with a child. Then why did you have a false passport? Luke asked. And why did Sophia say you were at the house? Richard looked around the cabin, searching for someone still willing to believe him. She is confused. Children repeat things they hear. Sophia stood. Her knees trembled, but she stayed upright. I saw him in the hallway, she said. He told another man they would move us before morning. The words landed quietly, but no one mistook their weight. Richard's gaze fixed on her. Sit down. Naomi stepped forward. Whitmore pulled her back. Do not, she warned him. He looked at her, anger and doubt fighting across his face. I said I need identification. And I said that child is in danger. He reached for the inside pocket of Naomi's coat. She turned slightly, trying to keep him from exposing what was hidden there. To Whitmore, the movement looked like resistance. To Richard, it looked like opportunity. He moved toward Sophia again. Luke blocked him. The cabin filled with overlapping voices. The flight attendant ordered everyone to remain seated. A passenger near the aisle asked someone to call airport security. Sophia pressed the envelope beneath her backpack strap. Naomi felt Whitmore's hand close around the edge of the leather case inside her coat. "Do not open that here," she said. "Why?" "Because once you do, every person connected to him will know exactly what is happening." Whitmore hesitated. Richard stopped moving. For the first time, he looked directly at Naomi, and recognition slowly entered his face. "You," he whispered. Whitmore pulled the case free. It slipped from his hand, struck the carpet, and opened beneath the white cabin lights. The badge slid across the carpet and stopped beside Whitmore's shoe. Its gold surface caught the overhead light, bright against the dark blue aisle. For one long second, the cabin seemed to lose every sound except the low hum of the ventilation system. Whitmore looked down. Luke looked down. Even Richard stopped breathing, as if the small piece of metal had changed the pressure inside the aircraft. Whitmore bent slowly and lifted the open leather case. The words were clear. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Naomi Carter. His fingers tightened around the edge. The certainty that had carried him through the last 10 minutes disappeared from his face. Naomi did not look at him. Her attention remained fixed on Richard. "Close the forward door," she said. This time, no one questioned whether she had the authority to give the order. The lead flight attendant reached for the control panel near the entrance. Luke moved closer to Sophia, placing himself between her and the aisle. Richard glanced toward the jet bridge, then toward the rear galley. Every exit was narrowing. Whitmore stared at Naomi's identification again. "You are federal." His voice had fallen to a whisper. "I was federal when you decided not to ask the child a question," Naomi said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Whitmore's face flushed beneath the cold cabin lights. Around them, passengers lowered their phones one by one. A woman who had whispered about Naomi earlier turned toward the window. A man across the aisle studied his hands. The badge had changed what they believed, but Naomi knew it should not have. The false passport had been real before the badge appeared. Sophia's fear had been real. Richard's lies had been visible. Naomi had told the truth while dressed in ordinary clothes, and they had treated it like noise. Only authority had made them listen. Richard recovered before Whitmore did. "Anyone can carry a badge," he said. "Verify it." Naomi finally turned toward him. "You already did." His expression tightened. She saw the memory move behind his eyes. Months earlier, during a charity reception in Georgetown, Naomi had crossed a ballroom carrying a tray of sparkling water. Richard had looked at her for less than a second. She had lowered her eyes and kept walking. He had not noticed the woman. He had noticed the possibility of surveillance. That was why he had recognized her now. Whitmore reached for the radio at his shoulder. Naomi stopped him with one sentence. "No open channel." His hand froze. "Why?" "Because someone outside this plane is listening for exactly that call." The cabin remained still. Beyond the windows, ground vehicles moved beneath gray afternoon light. A fuel truck rolled past at walking speed. 2 baggage workers stood near a cart 50 yards away. Any one of them could have been watching. Naomi held out her hand. "Remove the restraint." Whitmore looked at the red mark forming around her wrist, then released it. The metal opened with a small click. Naomi rubbed the skin once and took back her credentials. There was no triumph in her face. Only urgency. "Officer Bennett, keep Sophia behind you. Do not separate her from the backpack or the envelope." Luke nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Sergeant Whitmore, contact airport operations through the secure terminal line. Ask for Assistant Special Agent in Charge Marcus Reed. Use my name and no one else's." Whitmore swallowed. "Understood." Richard took a careful step backward. Naomi saw it. Do not move. He smiled again, but the performance was weaker now. You have no idea what you are doing. I know you booked this seat under your own name because you thought respectability was better protection than secrecy, Naomi said. I know the passport in Officer Bennett's hand was printed 48 hours ago. I know the 3 names on Sophia's envelope connect your foundation to missing children in 4 states. Richard's smile vanished. Sophia watched Naomi from behind Luke's shoulder. The fear in her eyes had not disappeared, but something else had entered beside it. Hope. Whitmore turned toward the terminal phone mounted near the forward galley. Before he could reach it, the cabin lights flickered once. Then every light inside the aircraft went dark. Darkness swallowed the cabin, and for half a second no one moved. Then emergency strips along the floor glowed red, tracing the aisle in thin lines. A child gasped near the back. Someone whispered a prayer. Naomi heard the change before she saw it, the soft scrape of a shoe, the rustle of fabric, Richard moving while everyone else was blind. Luke, keep Sophia down, she said. Whitmore, guard the forward door. Her voice stayed level, giving the darkness shape. Luke lowered himself beside Sophia's seat and guided her behind the armrest. Whitmore stepped toward the entrance, one hand reaching for the wall until he found the door frame. Richard was no longer where he had been. Naomi followed the sound of his breathing toward the rear galley. Outside the windows, the airport still moved under gray daylight, but the cabin remained sealed in shadow. The power loss was too precise. It had happened seconds after Whitmore moved toward the secure phone. Someone outside had cut the aircraft's ground connection. That meant Richard was not alone. This is your last chance to stay where you are, Naomi said. A quiet laugh came from the darkness. You still think this is your operation? His voice sounded closer to the rear service exit. Naomi moved slowly, one hand gliding along the seat backs. She could smell coffee, leather, and the faint electrical scent left by the dead lights. The false passport is in federal custody, she said. The envelope is protected. Every person connected to you is already being identified. You have one frightened child and a piece of paper. I have you trying to escape. Richard reached the galley. Metal clicked softly. He was testing the service door again. That exit will not open while the aircraft is connected to the jet bridge, the lead flight attendant warned from the front. Richard ignored her. Luke's voice came from behind Naomi. Agent Carter, Sophia says there is something else in the backpack. Naomi stopped. What? Sophia answered for herself. A phone. Richard went silent. Naomi turned toward the girl's voice. Where did it come from? The woman at the bus station put it under the lining. She said not to turn it on unless the blue door failed. Naomi's pulse sharpened. The device had not appeared in any briefing. That meant the woman had known the official plan might be compromised. Take it out carefully, Naomi said. Fabric shifted. A moment later, a small blue light appeared between the seats, dim but steady. It illuminated Sophia's hands and the lower half of Luke's face. The phone screen displayed only one symbol, a white circle counting down from 60. Richard left the service door. Naomi heard him moving back toward the cabin. Give me that phone, he said. His calm was gone. Stay behind me, Luke told Sophia. The countdown reached 54. Naomi understood. It was not a bomb. It was an automatic transmission. When the timer ended, the device would send whatever data it carried to a secure server. Richard understood too. That phone contains stolen material, he said. It could endanger everyone on this aircraft. Then why are you afraid of it? Naomi asked. 48. Richard stepped into the red emergency light. For the first time, every passenger could see him without the protection of his polished smile. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the phone. Sophia, he said, forcing softness back into his voice, you do not understand what that woman gave you. Sophia held the device closer. She said you would tell me that. 39. Whitmore returned from the forward door. The jet bridge access panel is locked from the terminal side, he said. Someone has sealed us in. Naomi looked through the window. Near the base of the bridge, a ground employee in a reflective vest stood beside the electrical box. He was not watching the plane. He was watching the countdown reflected faintly in the glass. "Whitmore," Naomi said, "the men below us is Richard's contact." Whitmore followed her gaze. His expression changed as the scale of his mistake became clear. He had not removed a suspicious passenger. He had exposed a federal agent, trapped a witness, and alerted an entire network. 24. Richard moved toward Sophia. Whitmore stepped into his path. "You are not going near that child." Richard stared at him. "You have no idea who you are protecting." Whitmore looked back at Naomi's reddened wrist, then at Sophia crouched behind Luke. "I know who I failed to protect." 12. The cabin lights flickered. 7. Richard glanced toward the rear exit. 4. The phone chimed once, clean and bright in the darkness. Then the screen filled with photographs, flight records, bank transfers, and the faces of 6 missing children. Outside the aircraft, sirens began moving across the runway. The sirens grew louder, their red and blue reflections moving across the dark windows in slow waves. Inside the cabin, the phone screen continued filling with names, dates, and flight numbers. Naomi stepped closer to Sophia but stopped before entering the girl's space. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," she said. Sophia looked at her, still holding the phone with both hands. "Is it over?" Naomi glanced toward Richard. "Not yet." Whitmore remained between him and the child. His posture had changed. The authority was still there, but the certainty was gone. In its place was something quieter and more difficult. Responsibility. Richard looked toward the forward door as airport security vehicles surrounded the aircraft. "You are all making a terrible mistake," he said. "Those records are fabricated." Naomi took the phone from Sophia and studied the first transfer file. It contained passenger manifests, private terminal logs, and photographs matched to missing child reports from Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New York. The information was too detailed to dismiss. "The server received everything," Naomi said. "Even if this phone disappears, the evidence does not." Richard's face became still. The last of his confidence drained away. A heavy knock sounded from the jet bridge door. Whitmore reached for the intercom, but Naomi stopped him. "Use the verification phrase." He nodded and lifted the handset. "Identify command." A voice answered through the speaker. "Marcus Reed. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Blue door secure." Sophia closed her eyes when she heard the words. Her shoulders lowered for the first time since Naomi had seen her board the aircraft. The forward door opened moments later, and Assistant Special Agent in Charge Marcus Reed entered with 2 federal officers and an airport supervisor. No one rushed. No one shouted. Reed looked first at Sophia, then at Naomi's wrist, where the red mark from the restraint was still visible. His expression tightened. "Agent Carter." "The witness is secure," Naomi said. "The primary subject is Richard Vale." The device transmitted the full file. Reed gave a short nod. The federal officers approached Richard and informed him that he was being taken into custody. Richard looked across the cabin for support, but the passengers who had once watched Naomi with suspicion now avoided his eyes. The man in the expensive suit had lost the one thing he had relied on most, the willingness of others to believe him without question. Luke handed Reed the false passport. This was in his possession. Whitmore removed his own hand from his equipment belt and let it fall to his side. "I detained Agent Carter before checking the child's statement," he said. His voice was low, but everyone nearby heard him. "I treated his version as credible and hers as a threat." Reed looked at Naomi, leaving the response to her. Whitmore faced her fully. "I was wrong." Naomi did not answer immediately. The cabin lights returned, one row at a time, revealing tired faces, lowered phones, and Sophia seated beneath a thin airline blanket Luke had placed around her shoulders. "An apology matters," Naomi said at last. "But not because I carry a federal badge." Whitmore's eyes dropped briefly to the credentials in her hand. "I understand." "No," she said. "You understand now because you know who I am." The test comes next time, when the person in front of you has no title, no agency, and no one important waiting outside the door. The words settled over him without anger. That made them harder to escape. Whitmore nodded slowly. Then I will do better next time. Naomi looked toward Sophia. Start now. Whitmore turned and approached the girl carefully, stopping several feet away. He lowered himself until they were at the same eye level. Sophia, he said, I should have asked you first. Are you safe right now? She studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Naomi and Luke before answering. Yes. Whitmore exhaled as though he had been holding his breath since the badge hit the floor. Outside, federal vehicles surrounded the jet bridge. Inside, Richard was escorted away in silence. Naomi sat beside Sophia, leaving enough space between them for the girl to choose closeness rather than have it forced upon her. After a moment, Sophia reached across the seat and took Naomi's hand. By sunrise, the airport had returned to its ordinary rhythm, but nothing felt ordinary to Naomi. She stood behind a wide glass wall near a private family assistance room, watching Sophia run into her mother's arms. Elena Ramirez dropped to her knees and held her daughter as though the distance between them had been measured in years instead of days. Neither spoke at first. They simply stayed there, surrounded by soft morning light, their reflections trembling across the polished floor. Naomi felt the mark around her wrist beneath the cuff of her coat. It had faded from red to a pale shadow, but she could still feel the memory of the metal. Marcus Reed stood several feet away, speaking quietly with federal investigators. The files from the phone had already led agents to 2 houses and a private hangar outside Philadelphia. 6 children had been located safely before dawn. 3 people connected to Richard Vale had been taken into custody, including the ground employee who had cut power to the aircraft. Richard's foundation accounts were frozen, his travel records secured, and the respectable life he had built around lies had finally begun to collapse under the weight of evidence. Luke Bennett approached Naomi with 2 cups of coffee. Black, no sugar, he said, offering one. Naomi accepted it. You remembered. You mentioned it when we were waiting for the family. He looked through the glass at Sophia and her mother. I keep thinking about how close we came to putting you off that plane. Naomi took a slow sip. Think about why. Luke nodded. He did not defend himself. That mattered. Across the terminal, Whitmore stood alone beside a row of empty seats. His uniform was neat, but his equipment belt rested on the chair next to him. He had voluntarily submitted his report and requested an independent review of his actions. Before leaving the aircraft, he had also asked that every passenger video be preserved, including the moments that showed him ignoring Sophia and restraining Naomi. He did not ask anyone to protect his reputation. He asked them to preserve the truth. When he finally walked over, he carried Naomi's leather credential case in both hands. This belongs to you, he said. Naomi took it, but did not open it. Whitmore looked toward the glass room. I thought authority meant acting quickly. Sometimes it means slowing down, Naomi replied. Long enough to see who is being heard and who is being dismissed. He nodded. I cannot undo what I did. No, but I can make sure it changes what I do next. Naomi studied him. Regret was easy when consequences arrived. Change was harder because it had to continue after witnesses went home. Then do not remember me as the federal agent whose badge embarrassed you, she said. Remember the woman you did not believe before you saw it. Whitmore lowered his eyes. I will. Sophia entered the terminal holding her mother's hand. She wore the same faded blue backpack, now lighter without the phone and envelope. When she reached Naomi, she opened her arms. Naomi knelt and let the girl decide the distance. Sophia hugged her tightly. You said you would stay with me, she whispered. I meant it. Even when nobody believed you. Naomi looked toward Luke and Whitmore, then back at Sophia. Especially then. Elena thanked Naomi through tears, but Naomi shook her head gently. Your daughter saved herself. She told the truth when powerful people wanted her silent. Sophia straightened at those words. Outside the windows, an airplane lifted from the runway and climbed into the gold morning sky. Naomi opened her credential case. The badge caught the sunlight, but she closed it again and placed it inside her coat. The metal had revealed her authority, but it had not created her dignity. That had been hers before anyone knew her name. Whitmore picked up his equipment belt, then paused at the restraints hanging from it. He removed them and placed them in his locker bag before walking away. Naomi watched him go, unsure whether one morning could change a lifetime of assumptions, but certain that change always began with a moment someone could no longer excuse. Sophia and her mother disappeared into the crowd, hand in hand. Naomi remained by the glass as the plane became a small silver point above the clouds. The lesson was simple, though the world often made it difficult. Truth does not become more truthful when it carries a badge, and dignity should never depend on proving that you are important. So what would you have done in that cabin before Naomi's identity was revealed, and would you have listened to her without seeing the badge?